Derek Lawson hadn't even finished his sentence when Melanie Brooks's sharp scream sliced through the air. Security remove this man from the VIP area immediately. The words exploded across the lobby of Westbridge Financial like a stray bullet, snapping every bowed head upward in sudden alert. And in the center of that storm, Derek stood, frozen his hand, gripping his worn leather briefcase, as if holding on to the last fragile piece of peace he still had. All he wanted was access to his safe deposit box, a simple request, yet Melanie's contemptuous gaze twisted that ordinary act into an unnamed crime. Warm golden lights glowed across the lobby, but the atmosphere thickened, heavy and sunless, as if someone had pulled shutters over the sky. Carlos Rivera, the security guard, approached his black shoes, striking the marble floor, one firm beat after another, each step echoing the unspoken declaration that Derek didn't belong here. A pulse hammered in Derek's temple, but his voice remained strangely calm. "I just want access to my safe deposit box," he said, each word slow, steady, a reminder that a human being still deserved to be treated like one. But Melanie let out a cold laugh, so icy it felt like it could freeze the breath in someone's lungs. "A safe deposit box. This area isn't for people like you. People like you." The phrase hit Derek's chest like an invisible punch, and he wasn't the only one who heard it. Customers in line heard it too. A businessman in a grey suit frowned. An elderly woman, hands trembling, raised her phone to record. A young man live streaming fell silent, angling his camera toward Derek and Melanie. Phones lit up. Eyes sharpened. A tense silence rippled out like an invisible shockwave. Carlos didn't ask a single question. He placed a hand on Derek's shoulder and shoved. The briefcase burst open, papers scattering across the marble, the dry slap of each sheet hitting the floor, sounding like a verdict. The man in the simple shirt bent down to gather them, his large hands trembling, but his movements gentle, patient, as if he were picking up pieces of his dignity that had just shattered in front of the world. In that moment of judgment, thick in the air, Melanie folded her arms, tilted her head, and stared at him, as if he were performing some ridiculous act in a place he never should have stepped into. "You are disturbing our VIP clients. If you do not meet the requirements, please move to the regular service area." The words fell like a thin blade, cold, sharp, merciless. From the far corner, the young blogger live-streaming tightened her grip on her phone, fury burning in her eyes. "Everyone can see this," she whispered into her mic, her voice shaky but fierce. "This is discrimination, plain as day." In the wide marble lobby, Derek felt every stare prick his skin like needles. He saw irritation in the customer's eyes, indifference in the way Carlos blocked his path, and cruel pride gleaming in Melanie's smile. He had spent his whole life being judged by his skin, yet this moment still tightened his chest. "Stay patient, Derek," he reminded himself. "Do not react the way they want. Do not let them define who you are." Behind the counter, Tracy Miller, the floor manager, stepped out with a calculating smile as soon as she saw the scene. Her gaze skimmed over Derek, down to his plain clothes, and in that brief flicker, Derek saw it, the judgment already made. No questions, no information, just a glance. "We have standards here," Tracy said, her voice soft but laced with thorns. "You should try another branch, somewhere more appropriate." The statement wasn't loud, but loud enough for the entire lobby to hear, enough to chill Derek's spine, enough for someone behind him to mutter, "That's too much." An elderly woman watched the scene, unfold her eyes, sinking with deep disappointment. "My granddaughter is black too," she whispered. It hurts to see this. All of it, the anger, the humiliation, the helplessness, the swallowed pain, and the desperate grip on dignity swirled into a tight knot in Derek's chest. But he remained upright, calm, refusing to shout or argue. He knew that the moment he lost control, they would use it to justify everything they had done. Then, like a slit of light tearing through darkness, Derek lifted his head. His eyes glimmered with a quiet fire that had burned for years. "I will access my safe deposit box," he said, each word echoing through the thickened air. He had no idea that in just a few minutes, every person standing before him would confront the harshest truth of their lives. Because the storm that was coming was not something Derek walked into, it was something they had dragged down upon themselves, and his response would shake the financial world of America. The wall clock ticked once, a dry, sharp sound, a tiny moment, but that moment was the beginning of everything. Forever. The soft scrape of papers sliding across the marble floor continued as Derek Lawson bent down to gather each sheet. Yet around him, the tense silence was shifting into waves of judgmental whispers. A woman wearing a pearl necklace tilted her phone for a better angle, murmuring to her friend, "There is always drama with people like that," even though no one really knew what people like that meant, except whatever prejudice lived in her own mind. Stifled laughs and probing stares pressed in on Derek like an invisible corner, tightening around him. Melanie Brooks leaned against the counter, arms crossed, tapping her nude-colored nails on the surface, in a rhythm dripping with mockery, her lips curling as if she were watching cheap entertainment. "I said it already," she announced, loudly enough for the entire lobby to hear, "You are standing in the wrong place. The VIP area is not for people who do not meet the requirements." That phrase, "not meeting the requirements," dropped into the air like a verdict delivered without a trial. Tracy Miller stepped forward, folding her arms like an arrogant judge, her eyes sweeping Derek from head to toe. "You should understand," Tracy said, her tone even but icy. "We have standards. These premium services require customers who are appropriate." A young man nearby let out a snicker, turning to his friend to whisper, "Look at what he is wearing. He probably does not even have a savings account." Derek heard every word. He felt each comment cut across his pride like a thin blade. Still, he continued picking up his documents, slow, deliberate, controlled, as if this was the last way he could hold on to whatever dignity remained under the weight of dozens of watching eyes. In that moment, he thought of his mother, the woman who taught him that when the world tries to turn you into the angry man, they expect the strongest form of resistance is calm. But calm right now tasted like swallowing fire. Just as Derek collected the final paper, Melanie threw out another jab. "Do you even have the key to the safe deposit box, or is that just another story to get attention?" Derek opened his mouth to answer, but Melanie raised a hand to silence him. "No, do not interrupt me. Policy requires 3 forms of identification, 3 months of income statements, proof of employment, and a credit check. And if the transaction exceeds $500, you need a source of funds letter. Do you have all of that?" A man in his 50s laughed under his breath. "Looking at that outfit, he probably cannot pass the basic verification." Derek tightened his grip on the leather briefcase. "I am not withdrawing money. I only need access to my own safe deposit box." But that reply did nothing to soften Melanie. Instead, she tilted her head, eyes narrowing with amusement. "Everyone says that?" Tracy cut in, voice laced with suggestion. "Lately we have had several people from certain communities pretending to be safe box owners. We have to be cautious." Derek heard the word communities clearly. It was no accident. It was a poisoned arrow dipped in stereotype. His heart pounded hard against his ribs, but his expression did not change. He had lived through countless moments like this, moments where people refused to see the human being in him, and instead saw only the stories they projected onto him. Perhaps Melanie continued louder. Now you should try the branch over on South Laurel Street. They would be a much better fit for you. A group of young customers let out a collective "oh," as if witnessing a dramatic prank. The young man live-streaming whispered into his camera, "They just South Laurel Streeted him." Oh wow, this is discrimination in broad daylight. Viewers surged, 8,000, then 10,000 comments flooding the screen. Sue them, fire her now. This is why I do not trust banks. But inside the bank, none of the employees cared about the outrage boiling outside. All they saw was a black man in simple clothing, standing in a luxurious VIP zone, and for them that was enough to decide everything. Melanie raised her voice again, performing more loudly than ever. "You are making the VIP clients wait. Do you not see they all have important business to handle?" Derek looked around. Not a single VIP was waiting. Only curious, irritated, or entertained faces watching the spectacle unfold. The truth sat plainly in front of them, but Melanie kept performing. "You are wasting our time," she added, speaking to him like he was a child. "And I will not allow anyone to interfere with the bank's security procedures." Carlos the guard stepped closer. Each heavy footstep sounded like a drum, signaling approaching force. "Do you want me to remove him?" Carlos asked, his voice deep and rigid. A shiver crawled down Derek's spine, but he lifted his head. Though his eyes carried the weight of hurt, not a flicker of fear showed. "I only want access to safe deposit box 4928. I pay the monthly fee in full, and I have the key." He repeated it this time, lower, clearer, like a fraying wire pulled taut. But Melanie refused to yield. "We do not accept any fake lockboxes." She emphasized the word fake, then turned to Tracy. "I think he is trying to make a video to frame us." Tracy eyed the live streaming phone. "Obviously. They came here just to cause trouble." Then came the sentence that crushed Derek's chest. "I assess that he is unemployed, financially unstable, and definitely not part of the premium client tier." Someone behind him burst into laughter. A woman shook her head, murmuring, "So sad." Derek swallowed the humiliation rising to his throat. Inside him was a storm, a restrained fury, a familiar pain still as sharp as the first time he ever faced it. Their words were not new, but somehow each time still cut fresh. And then a thought flickered in his mind, small yet powerful enough to ignite a fire in his eyes. A simple thought. All right, keep going. Because they had no idea the real storm was only just beginning to turn back towards them. He inhaled deeply, slow and steady, the breath of a man ready to make a move that would flip the entire board. And right at that moment, the wall clock struck 2:51 in the afternoon, 9 minutes before Derek needed to retrieve the documents required to complete an international transaction, 9 minutes before everyone in that bank would realize they had made a mistake they could never undo. The air inside the Westbridge financial lobby thickened as if someone had dropped a heavy stone onto a perfectly still lake, sending waves of judgment rippling through every breath. When the clock struck 2:51 in the afternoon, Derek Lawson's patience had stretched thin like a taut thread. Yet he still stood tall, his gaze steady, unwavering. He knew one sharp frown or one firm word would become their excuse to paint him as the problem. But across the counter, Melanie Brooks was preparing something sharper than words, the unshakable confidence of someone who believed she had the right to judge a man solely by his appearance. "You say you have a safe deposit box." Melanie tilted her head, her eyes gleaming with manufactured suspicion. "Anyone can claim that. Let me ask you this. Do you have proof? A passport? A driver's license? Income verification? Employment confirmation?" She raised her voice, enunciating each word so everyone within 30 feet could hear. "And to access the VIP area, you must demonstrate financial capability. Do you have that?" A soft, mocking chuckle rose from somewhere behind him. Derek slowly opened his leather briefcase and pulled out the gleaming metal key, the one thing that truly proved his right to be there. He held it up where Melanie could clearly see. "Here, my key. Box number 4928. Melanie froze for half a second, then immediately slipped back into her familiar mask of disdain. "Anyone can buy a key like that," she said, widening her eyes as if revealing a secret. "We have to verify your background, your income, and your reliability." "Reliability," Derek repeated, his voice low but sharp. Melanie laughed. "You know, these days there are many people pretending to own boxes they do not, especially from certain areas." The implication spread like a shadow. Tracy Miller leaned toward the counter, her tone soft but laced with venom. "We recently had several cases of people from South Laurel trying to claim boxes that were not theirs. You understand that, don't you?" A man nearby tilted his head, clicking his tongue. "Here we go again." Derek felt the veins in his temple pulse so hard, it seemed they might rupture. The unfounded accusations kept coming, each one tossing another log onto the fire burning inside him. Still, he held himself together. He reminded himself to stay calm, but calm was not the same as silent. "You both said anyone can claim a safe deposit box," Derek said, locking eyes with Tracy. "But the bank system requires original identification upon registration. And I registered that box 6 years ago. The fee has been deducted automatically every month from my account." Tracy did not flinch. "You can say whatever you want. Where is the documentation?" "Where? Why must I prove something that has existed for 6 years?" Derek asked. Melanie ignored the question entirely. She changed the subject deliberately, pushing the moment toward a breaking point. "We need to run a credit check first. For a safe deposit box," Derek lifted his chin. "What procedure requires that?" Melanie shrugged. "The procedure for individuals who may pose a risk." The word individuals dropped like a labeled accusation, as if Derek had been placed on a suspect list the moment he walked through the door. Some customers began whispering more loudly now, no longer trying to hide it. A middle-aged woman murmured, "That seems harsh, but seeing how they are reacting, he must have done something." And just like that, the thing Derek feared most began to unfold. They did not need evidence, only suspicion. Carlos Rivera pressed a finger to the radio on his shoulder, looking at Derek the way someone might look at a man about to cause trouble. "Keep talking," Derek told himself. "Keep pushing. Let them reveal everything." But Melanie refused to let truth enter the room. She delivered the hardest blow yet. "You know," she said, lowering her voice just enough, but still loud enough, for customers to hear, "there have been many people who look like you, trying to fake documents. Looking at you, it is hard to believe you have a VIP account." A unified gasp swept through the lobby this time, not out of amusement, but shock at the bluntness of her words. Even the young man live streaming fell silent for a moment, before whispering into his mic, "Wow, she just said it outright." Tracy Miller decided to add another strike. "We also need to check whether you are on our internal watch list." people who show signs of unusual behavior. Derek turned toward her, his gaze deep and heavy, like a drop into a dark well. "And where exactly did you see unusual behavior? In my unbranded shirt, or in the color of my skin?" Tracy opened her mouth to respond, but at that moment, a bead of sweat slid down Derek's temple, not from fear, but from the rage he was holding inside his chest. "I have work to complete before 3 o'clock, Derek said, his voice low, yet strong as steel. "There are documents in that safe deposit box that must be transferred, and I will not leave until I receive the service I am entitled to." Melanie shot back immediately. "Then stand there and wait. Our system prioritizes clients who are suitable not." She left the sentence hanging, but everyone knew the word sitting at the tip of her tongue. At that exact moment, a young male customer spoke up for the first time. "Why are you treating him like that? He has done nothing wrong." Melanie snapped around, glaring. "You are not involved. Do not interfere with our security procedures." Meanwhile, the live streamer zoomed in on Derek's face. "Look closely," he told his viewers. "This is how they treat a black man in this bank. No proof. No reason. Just prejudice." Viewers surged to 15,000, then 20,000. But inside the bank, no one cared about that number. All they saw was a lone man surrounded by a tightening circle of bias. Derek felt his jaw lock his grip, tightening on his briefcase, as if holding on to a piece of his soul that was being trampled. He had endured this kind of humiliation all his life. But today, something was different. Today, he felt the line inside him snap. And when that line broke, what came next was no longer reaction. It was decision. A decision that would change the lives of every single person in that room. Derek's eyes turned cold, and deep within them a storm awakened. 2:53 in the afternoon, 7 minutes before everything collapsed, and they had no idea. The moment the second hand on the large Westbridge financial clock slid to 2:53 in the afternoon, the air inside the lobby became so heavy it felt capable of crushing the chest of anyone standing there. Derek Lawson remained exactly where he was, his hand gripping the leather briefcase as if it were the final boundary, keeping him from sliding into the abyss of humiliation that had been woven around him stitch by accusations, stares and the attitudes of people who stood above him, as though watching a criminal who had not yet been handcuffed. And then, as if pushing everything to the breaking point, Tracy Miller leaned toward Melanie, but deliberately spoke loudly enough for the entire lobby to hear. "I genuinely suspect he is trying to access the safe deposit box to prepare for cooperating with someone." She left the sentence hanging, but someone behind Derek filled the silence with a whisper, dripping with malice. "You mean a robbery?" A long hiss rippled through the lobby like a cold wave rolling across the marble floor. Derek did not move, but the vein in his neck throbbed violently. This was no longer suspicion. This was a direct accusation. Carlos Rivera stepped forward again, his hand resting on his radio thumb, brushing the button as if preparing to trigger an alarm at any second. "What if he is planning to threaten someone?" Carlos said, his deep voice carrying an exaggerated caution Derek recognized instantly, the kind that creates a fake sense of danger. Melanie glanced at Carlos, then smiled a slow smile, razor sharp. "Until he proves he has no malicious intent," she said, her eyes locked on Derek. "We have no choice but to consider him a potential threat." Nearby, the young woman, live-streaming, burst out. A threat. A threat to what he is literally just standing there. But her voice was drowned out by the flood of comments pouring into the stream, now nearing 30,000 viewers. Unbelievable. They are inventing a story. Sue that entire bank. But inside those marble walls, no one cared about the outrage outside. Only accusations and mocking laughter echoed through the room. Derek drew a deep breath, steadying his voice as he said, "You are accusing me of being a criminal without any evidence." Tracy responded instantly, her tone casual, almost bored, as if discussing the weather. "You are creating risk, and we cannot allow an unqualified person to freely walk through the VIP area." Derek tightened his grip on the briefcase strap. This time, the phrase unqualified was no longer discrimination, it was a sentence. And something inside him cracked, something he had spent years trying to mend. Melanie refused to give him space to recover. "We had someone just like him last week," she said, sweeping her gaze over the customers as if inviting them into her performance. Claimed he had a box, showed a fake key, then tried to distract the staff so his accomplices could rob the place afterward. A man nearby let out a fearful breath. A woman covered her mouth as if bracing for violence. Derek looked at them and understood. They were scared not of him, but of the story Melanie was crafting. In their eyes, he was no longer a person. He had become the main character in a crime script Melanie, Tracy, and Carlos were writing right in front of them. A script in which even one deep breath from him could be interpreted as a threat. Derek wanted to laugh, but that laugh would ignite the fire, so he did not. Instead, he said, "I want to speak to the highest-ranking manager of this branch, right now." Carlos let out a loud laugh. "Who do you think you are to give orders here?" Derek looked at him calmly. "A customer." But Melanie stepped forward, cutting him off with a voice sharp as shattered glass. "No. A person who is trying to cause trouble." A cold shiver ran down Derek's spine. He had tried to stay calm since the moment he walked in, swallowing every verbal blade, keeping his tone steady, holding on to composure so they could not use anything against him. But that did not matter anymore. They did not want calm. They wanted a pretext, a reason to justify everything they were doing. And if they did not have one, they would simply create one. Tracy Miller tapped her nail against the counter, her voice dropping just enough, but still clearly audible. "If necessary, I will call the LAPD right now. When the police arrive, they will handle someone who poses a potential robbery threat like you." That sentence ignited a tremor in the crowd. A young man blurted out, "Wait, what?" Nobody here saw him do anything, but Melanie snapped toward him, her eyes icy. "Do you want to take responsibility if something bad happens?" The man froze. His fear seeped into the people around him, like an invisible toxin spreading from glance to glance, turning uncertainty into suspicion, suspicion into judgment, until the entire lobby became a testing ground for prejudice. When enough people believe something truth no longer matters. Derek knew that better than anyone. He had lived under that shadow his entire life. A sharp beep sounded at the entrance, and Carlos looked toward it, then nodded. "If he stays here any longer, I am calling the police," he said. "This is the final warning." Derek did not react, but inside him something broke. Quietly, without drama, just a small fracture, but a deep one. The fracture of patience stretched to its limit. And when patience breaks, what follows is not restraint. It is action, the kind of action none of the people in that room could imagine. Derek looked at Melanie, at Tracy, at Carlos, at the live streamers, at the frightened, judgmental, uneasy customers. Then he said a single phrase, soft but sharp as the slice of a blade. "All right." The words made Melanie frown. "All right, what is that supposed to mean?" Derek didn't answer, but his eyes had changed from an endurance to decision, a decision that in just a few minutes would make the entire branch collapse like a tower built from playing cards. 2:56 in the afternoon, 4 minutes before the storm began. And they still had no idea. The VIP elevator doors slid open at 2:58 in the afternoon, with a sound that cracked through the lobby like the opening shot of a tragedy Westbridge Financial had scripted for itself. From behind the gleaming steel doors, Daniel Reese stepped out, the regional manager, 45 years old, wearing a perfectly tailored grey suit and a navy tie pulled tight around his neck, like a symbol of the authority he believed he owned outright. Every step he took echoed on the marble floor like a judge's gavel, ready to sentence a man he had never met, but had already deemed guilty based entirely on the biased words of Melanie and Tracy. The moment Daniel appeared, Melanie rushed toward him like she had found a lifeline, her voice full of urgent excitement. "Mr. Reese, thank goodness you are here. This man is trying to infiltrate the VIP area and is showing signs of attempted fraud." Tracy stood beside her, nodding rapidly, like a wind-up doll. "I believe this is a serious case. It could be tied to preparation for robbery, a baseless claim tossed out as if it were undeniable truth." The surrounding customers instantly stepped back, eyes widening at Derek Lawson, as though he had walked in holding a weapon instead of a briefcase. Derek did not move, but his eyes had shifted no longer, patient, now dangerously still. He knew exactly what came next. He had met men like Daniel Reese his entire life, men who thought they could determine someone's worth by the clothes on their back. Daniel stopped in front of Derek, his gaze sweeping from Derek's shoes up to his hair like a barcode scanner searching for defects. "I hear you are causing trouble," Daniel said, his voice steady, loud enough for everyone to hear, dripping with the superiority of someone accustomed to speaking down to others. "And that you refuse to provide verification." Derek met his stare. "I provided the key to my safe deposit box. They are demanding things that are not part of the procedure." Daniel let out a short, humorless laugh, not amusement, only dismissal. "You think you can bypass our security system with some cheap key you bought somewhere?" The remark ignited murmurs across the lobby. A few customers even nodded, as if their vague fear had just been validated. The live streamer zoomed in on Derek's face. My God, they are not checking anything. They are just looking at him and declaring him guilty. Daniel folded his arms and stepped back slightly, as if to distance himself from the potential threat. "The highest tier of our safe deposit service starts at $20,000 a year," he announced, as if reading a verdict. "Do you know that? Or did you just wander in here, hoping to try your luck?" Melanie and Tracy burst into laughter, sharp and mocking. Derek stayed silent. On the outside, he appeared calm, but inside his mind, every word Daniel spoke carved itself in like a blade dragged across stone. The years he spent fighting to be taken seriously. The meetings where he had to work twice as hard because he was the only black man in the room. The countless times people looked at him with suspicion before he had uttered a single word. All of it gathered and burned in this moment. Daniel kept going. "I have worked in this industry for 20 years, he said, lifting his chin, "and I know exactly what kind of client qualifies for premium services. You are not one of them." A simple sentence. A prejudice wrapped in the tone of expertise, yet enough to shatter any remaining hope that someone here might treat him like a human being who deserved basic respect. The live streamer nearly shouted. He said it out loud, This is racism happening right in front of everyone. But inside the bank, Daniel did not hear a thing. He did not need any reason beyond his own conviction that he was right. And then he gave the order. Call the police. Melanie immediately pulled out her phone, her voice bright with excitement, as if she had been waiting for this moment. Calling now, sir. LAPD will be here shortly to arrest this fraudster. The word arrest made several customers gasp, one woman covering her mouth as if she were about to faint. Carlos stood right behind Derek, one hand on his radio, the other resting near his belt where his keychain jingled softly, like a warning signal that he was ready to act. Daniel leaned in, close his voice, low, but packed with threat and disdain. You are in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong attitude. Each word sliced through the air like sharp shears, and I am giving you exactly 30 seconds to leave this bank before you are handcuffed and escorted out like a criminal. A brief silence fell. Enough for Derek to hear his own heartbeat. Enough for him to understand that in their eyes he was no longer a man being humiliated. He was the danger they had invented. A villain in the storyline they had decided he would play. Daniel began to count. 30. Several customers stepped back even farther, fear spreading like an invisible infection. 29. The live streamer whispered. Oh my God, he is actually counting. 28. Derek lifted his head. His eyes had changed completely. Calm was no longer restraint. It was preparation. Preparation for a truth none of them were ready for. A truth that would shatter every illusion of power they thought they held. Daniel kept counting, his voice echoing like he stood inside a courtroom. 27, 26. But in Derek's mind, those numbers were not a countdown to defeat. They were a countdown to a storm about to be unleashed. And this time, it would not fall on him. It would fall on the very people who believed they stood above him. 25. The live streamer murmured, voice trembling. He's going to regret this. Derek exhaled, a long breath, heavy but steady. He opened his leather briefcase. The sound of the zipper slicing open rang sharp and cold like the crack of a shot being fired. Daniel stopped counting for half a second. The entire lobby held its breath. And in that instant, time seemed to freeze. Because they didn't yet know that in just a few seconds, their entire world was about to flip upside down. 2:59 in the afternoon, 1 minute before collapse. And they still believed they were in control. They had no idea Derek Lawson was the one holding the reins of this entire confrontation. They were simply too blind to see it. The air inside the Westbridge financial lobby froze into something fragile and glass-like the moment the sound of Derek Lawson's leather briefcase zipper sliced through the silence, small yet sharp, like the opening cut of a psychological operation everyone in that room was about to endure. Eyes locked onto his hands, some trembling with fear, some burning with judgment, some eager for a piece of incriminating evidence, and some silently hoping for a miracle that might make the world a little less ugly. But the miracle was not small. It was enormous, and it was about to drown every single person standing on the high ground of their own prejudice. Derek pulled out a thin tablet, its metallic casing gleaming under the lights. He powered it on. The screen lit up, reflecting a face so calm it was terrifying, a calm no one who insulted him moments ago could possibly comprehend. Because they did not know that by this moment he was no longer trying to stay calm. He was preparing to strike. The tablet screen brightened fully. A bead of sweat slid down Daniel Reese's temple, though he kept his arms crossed, and his half-smile of authority firmly in place. "What exactly do you think you are doing?" he scoffed. "Trying to show us some fake app? I have seen this trick 100 times. Melanie shook her head, laughing loudly. "My goodness, these people always think a tablet can fool anyone." Tracy muttered, "Let's see what story he makes up next." But the tablet finished loading, and in a single instant, it shattered their arrogance. The logo of Lawson Capital Management Private Banking appeared on screen in razor-sharp clarity, undeniable and real. The girl live streaming nearly dropped her phone, her voice trembling. "You guys wait, I know that logo. That is, oh my God, that is the interface of the biggest private bank on the West Coast." Derek unlocked the tablet with biometric identification. The screen shifted, and then the numbers appeared exploding into the room like thunder on a clear day. Account balance: $842,573,912.24. Not a single person spoke. The air thickened into something almost liquid, trapping their breath in their chests. The live streamer gasped, her camera shaking wildly. "Oh my God! Oh my God! 842 million! Do you all see this? They just humiliated a man who owns almost $1 billion. A woman who had mocked Derek earlier stumbled back, her face turning ghost white. An older man whispered, "No, no, that cannot be real." But Daniel, clinging to his collapsing ego, like a drowning man grabbing at empty air, snapped, "Impossible. The app could be hacked or doctored." He spoke the words, but even he did not believe them. One look at Melanie's wide eyes, Tracy's trembling hands, and the way Carlos instinctively pulled his hand away from his radio made it clear they knew the truth. They knew every accusation they had thrown at him was now returning like a rain of acid. Derek tilted the tablet, letting the overhead lights illuminate the line beneath the balance. Tier 1 elite client, priority level, maximum. Melanie blinked rapidly, her lips shaking. This Derek looked straight at her, his voice low, slow, and powerful, like the roar of a provoked lion. "This is not fake. This is my account. And the fee for my safe deposit box number 4928, has been automatically deducted from this account for 6 years. Tracy lurched forward, eyes bulging. No, that amount is larger than the value of this branch," Derek replied. His tone was soft. His words were stone. Daniel could no longer hold his arms confidently across his chest. His voice cracked. Wait, I need to verify." He grabbed a company tablet from a nearby employee, typing so quickly his hand shook. The internal Westbridge financial system opened. He typed the name Lawson Derek. One press of enter, 1 second, one beep, and then his entire body froze. The screen displayed Derek's full internal profile. Priority, ultra client asset. Value $842,573,912. Premium Vault access. Founders Circle. Annual revenue. Generated for bank $32,400,000. Daniel read each line like he was reading the obituary of his own career. His face drained of color. His hands shook so hard he had to set the tablet down. From the entrance came the sound of LAPD sirens, responding to Melanie's call from 5 minutes earlier, when she still believed she was catching a dangerous fraud. 3 officers stepped inside, hands near their belts, expressions tense. But they froze at the sight before them. 3 bank employees, pale as chalk, a regional manager looking hollow, and the supposedly suspicious individual holding a screen with nearly $1 billion on it. A female LAPD officer asked, "We received a report of a robbery risk. What exactly is happening here?" Daniel stumbled forward, voice cracking. No. It was a misunderstanding. But the officer narrowed her eyes and turned to Derek. "So do you require assistance, sir?" The word hit the lobby like an earthquake, shifting the ground beneath every person who had sneered at him. For the first time that afternoon, someone addressed Derek according to who he truly was. He looked at the officers, then at Melanie Tracy and Daniel, the same people who had dragged him through the mud because they thought he had nothing to protect. His eyes hardened. "I am fine," he said calmly. "I am simply trying to access my safe deposit box." The officer nodded, but her stare moved to Daniel sharp and warning. And in that moment, for the first time since stepping out of the elevator, Daniel Reese finally understood one thing: the power he believed he held all along had never existed. And the harsh, simple truth had now been laid bare in front of him. While the entire lobby remained frozen in stunned silence, Derek took in a slow, deep breath. And in that instant, everyone felt it. This was not the climax. This was only the beginning, because the real storm was still gathering behind those calm eyes, and the next collapse would be far bigger than anything they could imagine. The moment the LAPD sirens faded outside the lobby of Westbridge, Financial sank into a strange, suffocating silence, so quiet the ticking of the wall clock could be heard, marking each passing second. The three officers looked around, then exchanged glances as they realized the dangerous fraud suspect in the report was in fact a billionaire standing calmly at the center of the lobby, untouched by the chaos swirling around him, as if none of it concerned him at all. The lead female officer stepped forward, her voice professional, but lowered with sharp attention. "Mr. Lawson, sir, would you like us to file a report or request an investigation into any misconduct?" Daniel Reese nearly jumped out of his skin. No need for a report. It was all a misunderstanding. My employees were simply following risk prevention procedures. His voice shook so violently, it sounded as though each word was tightening around his own throat. But the officer didn't look at Daniel. She looked directly at Derek, waiting for an answer from the only person who held authority in the room. Derek shook his head lightly. "I am not requesting anything further. I only need access to my safe deposit box. And I need everything to be transparent." That word, transparent, dropped into the air like the opening strike of a public trial. The officer nodded, once her eyes slicing through Daniel's facade of calm and seeing the panic beneath. "Then we will leave. If anything else occurs, call me directly." She slipped her card into Derek's hand. "For you only." 40,000 live stream viewers were glued to every motion inside the lobby. When the officers exited and the revolving door slowly closed behind them, the soft clunk of its mechanism sounded like the final lock, sealing the fates of the three employees who now stood frozen in place. No more police. No more shields. No one left to hide behind. Only the bare truth they had insulted, humiliated, threatened and falsely accused the wealthiest man ever to step inside their branch. Derek stood still, his eyes so cold the temperature in the room felt like it dropped. Daniel swallowed hard, the sound sharp like a pebble hitting the bottom of a well. He stepped toward Melanie and Tracy, his voice low but trembling like a leaf in the wind. Do you realize what we have done? This is career destruction." The voice came from somewhere in the crowd, or perhaps from Daniel's own fear. Melanie looked as though the blood had drained from her entire body. She braced herself against the counter, trying to breathe, but each breath caught painfully in her throat. Her polished nails, once symbols of confidence, now seemed like proof of the vanity that led her here. Tracy stood rigid as a statue, her face pale, her eyes unfocused, as though her soul had left her the moment the number 842 million flashed on the screen. Derek raised his wrist and checked his watch. 3:01 in the afternoon. The international transaction he needed was already late, yet he showed no urgency at all. That calmness in a situation where most people would be furious sent a shiver through the lobby. Because calm in an ordinary man is restraint, but calm in a man with power is a threat. Derek opened his tablet again. The glow from the screen lit his face, and for a brief second, every eye in the lobby followed the movement, as if watching a digital death sentence being prepared. He opened the Westbridge Financial app, not to check his account, but to display the automatic system alert, sent whenever an elite client experiences an incident. Urgent alert. Top-tier client encountered issue. Full executive board has been summoned. When the red notification flashed across the screen, Daniel almost collapsed. In his mind, he saw the faces of the entire executive board, the CEO, the chairman, the chief risk officer, the chief legal officer reading that alert and demanding an immediate explanation. And he knew exactly what that meant. A mistake with a regular client might be forgiven. A mistake with a client who generates more than $32 million in revenue for the bank. That was a blade that severed careers. Melanie finally spoke, but the sound was warped, desperate. "Mr. Lawson, I did not know." Derek turned toward her, his gaze slowly tracing her face, her flawless uniform, then down to the small nameplate on her chest. Melanie Brooks. "Did not know," his voice rumbled deep and steady like a stone hitting a still lake. "Did not know who I was. Did not know how your banking system works, or did not know how to treat a human being." Melanie stumbled back, clutching her chest, as if his words carried physical weight. Tracy tried to intervene, her voice cracking. "You have to understand, we were only following procedure." Derek let out a soft laugh. Not angry, just heartbreakingly disappointed. The kind of disappointment that made even bystanders feel a sting in their chest. What procedure teaches you to insult clients? What procedure teaches you to measure dignity by skin color? What procedure teaches you to accuse the innocent? No one could answer. Derek shifted his gaze to Daniel. "And you, the leader here, a man with 20 years of experience, correct? What experience? Deciding someone's worth based on 3 seconds of looking at their clothes." Daniel opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His lips trembled, his eyes reddened, and deep within them was the purest kind of fear, the kind that knew the situation could not be undone. But Derek still was not finished. He opened the transfer application of Morgan Chase Private Banking and began entering information digit by digit. When the screen displayed transfer amount $200 million, a shockwave rippled through the entire lobby. Melanie nearly collapsed. Tracy broke into silent tears. Daniel gasped, as if the wind had been knocked out of him. Derek looked at them, and in his eyes there was no coldness now, only the exhaustion of a man who had lived too long under the weight of prejudice. "You did more than delay my transaction," he said. "You insulted me, humiliated me, and you did it in front of the entire world." He lifted the tablet. The screen's glow cut across his face like a blade raised before the strike. And now his voice dropped steady and absolute. "It is my turn to respond in my way. The entire bank held its breath. One more tap and they would witness the greatest collapse in the history of this branch. Derek placed his finger on the execute transfer button. And in that moment, before he pressed down, everyone understood one truth. They had chosen the wrong man. The wrong moment. The wrong assumptions. And Derek Lawson was the lesson they would never forget. The moment Derek Lawson's fingertip touched the execute transfer button, the entire Westbridge financial lobby fell silent, as if the universe itself had stopped breathing. No humming of air vents, no footsteps, no whispers, only the chaotic heartbeat of the people witnessing the catastrophe they had created with their own hands. Like a verdict delivered through pure technology, the screen flashed wire transfer initiated $200 million. And in the next instant, a progress bar appeared, inching upward from 1% to 2%, then 5%, each number rising like a blade, slicing through Daniel Reese's career. An arrow piercing the arrogance of Melanie Brooks and Tracy Miller. A shockwave knocking the ground loose beneath every employee in the branch. 10%, 14%, 18%. Tracy gripped the counter, her mouth open but unable to make a sound. Melanie stumbled backward until her spine hit the wall, her eyes stretched wide, as if she were watching a car crash happen inches from her face. Daniel could no longer hold any semblance of leadership. He staggered like a man drunk on fear, sweat shining across his forehead, his hands trembling as if convulsing. Mr. Lawson, stop! He choked out, his voice squeezed thin as if strangled. We can talk. We can resolve this reasonably. Derek did not turn his head. He did not acknowledge any of them. His eyes remained fixed on the glowing tablet screen where the percentage ticked upward like a countdown to the collapse of their entire system. 25%, 30%, 33%. The live streamer practically screamed into the microphone, "Oh my God, he is moving 200 million. The money is leaving the bank. Viewership shot to 60,000, then 70,000 within seconds. Comments poured in like a storm. They are done. 200 million lost because of discrimination. Serves them right." But inside the cold marble lobby, those who were about to face the real consequences had no time to look at comments. All they could feel was the ground slipping out from under them. 38%, 41%, 45%. That was when Daniel's phone started vibrating violently in his hand. He looked down and went pale. CEO Robert Langford, chairman of the board, vice president of risk management, all calling at once. Before he could answer, new calls came in. Emails, urgent messages, internal system alerts. Code red major, client exodus detected. Daniel nearly burst into tears. "Please stop the transfer. Mr. Lawson, we misunderstood. The percentage climbed to 52%, 56%, 59%. Derek finally spoke, his voice so calm it made Melanie shiver. "No, you did not misunderstand. You did not understand anything at all." The words were soft, but fell like iron weights on the marble floor. Melanie's fingers curled tightly, her nails digging into her palms until her skin reddened. "I'm sorry, I did not know." "I did not mean to." Derek turned toward her, his eyes cutting straight through her tears. "Did not know," he repeated. "Then why was every request I made denied? Why did you tell me I did not belong here? Why did you accuse me of preparing to rob the bank?" Melanie broke down, crying. Tracy stumbled backward, her legs shaking so badly she nearly collapsed. The numbers kept climbing. 62%, 67%, 70%. When it reached 75%, the revolving door burst open with a loud thud like an explosion. CIO Robert Langford came rushing in like a man fleeing a burning building. His hair was disheveled, his tie crooked, his breathing ragged, as if he had sprinted the entire way. "Derek," he practically shouted. "Derek, stop, please, we can fix this." Derek did not turn around. Robert grabbed Daniel, first, shaking him by his collar. "What did you do? Do you have any idea who Mr. Lawson is? He is the most important client in our entire system." Daniel stumbled, his words dissolving into incoherent stutters. Robert released him and turned to Derek, his voice stripping away all anger, leaving only fear and pleading. "Derek, you have worked with me for 4 years. I know you are fair. Please let me fix this." Derek looked up, calm but unmoved. "You know I am fair. And I know you understand that what happened today was not the fault of one person." Robert swallowed hard and nodded weakly. Yes, I know that. But 200 million is being transferred," Derek said. "And I'm not stopping it." Robert nearly collapsed onto a chair. Everyone around them, even the live stream viewers, fell silent. Because they now understood, this was no longer about 3 employees. This was no longer a confrontation. This was a sentence. And Derek was the judge. The progress bar surged 82%, 88%, 93%, 97%. Melanie sobbed. "Please, please, I will lose my job," Derek answered softly, without a hint of anger. "You will lose your job because of your own actions." Tracy fell nearly to her knees. I have 3 children. I cannot. You should have thought of them when you chose how to treat people." Derek replied. Daniel said nothing. Tears streamed down his face, a sight no one in the bank had ever imagined, from the man who once believed he owned every room he walked into. And then 100%. The progress bar flashed bright. A small ding sounded. Small, but for this bank, it struck like thunder, tearing open the sky. Transfer completed. $200 million successfully transferred to Morgan Chase Private Banking. Daniel's career shattered. Melanie's job evaporated. Tracy's future plunged into chaos. The reputation of the entire branch collapsed. Derek powered off the tablet and buttoned his shirt cuff, a small gesture that felt like the final signature on a historic verdict. The lobby froze. No one dared breathe too loudly. No one dared move. Because everyone understood, Derek Lawson had just brought an entire system to its knees. And this was only the beginning. The moment the $200 million transfer completed, the entire lobby of Westbridge Financial fell into paralysis. No one spoke, no one dared move. Every eye locked onto Derek Lawson, as if witnessing a judge who had just concluded the most public trial in the history of banking. CEO Robert Langford stood frozen pale as ash, his hands trembling, because he knew Derek's decision had just opened a financial black hole he himself would have to answer for. But he also understood something even more important. He was not here to scold anyone. He was here to beg for a chance to fix the damage. Robert turned first to Daniel Reese, his voice no longer heavy, but sharp like a blade slicing through the air. "Daniel Reese, as of this moment, you are terminated. No negotiation, no excuses, no escape." Daniel did not protest. He had crumbled long before his pride and career, crushed right there on the marble floor in front of tens of thousands watching the live stream. He dropped to his knees like a defeated man, his entire body shaking. I am sorry, You are not apologizing to me," Robert cut him off, his voice to steel. "You apologize to the man you and your team humiliated, insulted, and falsely accused. Daniel slowly lifted his face toward Derek, eyes bloodshot, voice strangled. "Mr. Lawson, I was wrong. I was completely wrong." But Derek looked at him with a chilling stillness. No hatred, no rage, just the cold truth of a man who had been wounded too many times to believe in rushed apologies. Robert turned to Melanie Brooks next. Her cheeks were streaked with mascara, black lines dripping down like ink, exposing a performance that had just crumbled apart. Melanie Brooks, Robert said each word heavy as a hammer. "You are terminated immediately. Severe violation of professional ethics. Use of discriminatory language. Breaching procedure. Falsely accusing a client. Calling the police without cause." Melanie collapsed, covering her face, sobbing uncontrollably. "Please, I have loans, I have family, I did not mean." "You meant every word," Robert said, a verdict delivered with icy precision. "And you chose your future when you treated a client with contempt." Then his eyes shifted to Tracy Miller. Tracy looked petrified, her skin pale, her lips shaking as if her voice had died in her throat. "Tracy Miller," Robert said, "you are suspended immediately and will undergo a full investigation. You may be terminated depending on the findings regarding your use of biased service standards." Tracy burst into tears, her body shaking like a leaf in a storm. "I only followed Melanie. I did not think." Robert raised a hand. "Not thinking is what caused this disaster. Not thinking cost this bank $200 million. Not thinking pushed this branch into total crisis. Each word fell like nails, sealing the coffin of her career." In the corner of the lobby, the live stream viewers held their breath. The viewer count climbed past, 110,000 comments pouring in like a flood. "Serves them right. CEO firing them on the spot." "This is the most expensive lesson in discrimination ever." Robert turned back toward Derek. For the first time since he arrived, his eyes carried genuine humility. "Derek," he said, his voice low, sincere enough to turn the entire lobby silent. "I know no words can erase what you endured today. But I promise you this bank will change. I will change. And it begins right now." Derek looked straight back at him, and though he said nothing, his silence carried more power than any shouted demand. Robert inhaled deeply, then addressed the entire room. "Everyone listen carefully. What happened today is the greatest wake-up call in our careers. And I will not allow a systemic failure like this to ever happen again." Melanie cried uncontrollably. Tracy trembled violently. Daniel sat collapsed on the floor, his eyes hollow, like a man who had lost everything. And Derek, the man at the center of the storm, remained calm. But beneath that calm was the authority of someone who had just permanently rewritten the power structure of the bank. Robert bowed his head to Derek, a gesture almost unheard of in an industry where arrogance was practically part of the uniform. "If you are willing," Robert said, "I want to discuss the reforms you propose. Right now, right here, in front of everyone." And when Derek gave the slightest nod, the entire lobby seemed to tremble, because that moment marked something no one in the banking world ever imagined they would witness: a black billionaire, a man who had been underestimated, judged and insulted, now reshaping an entire banking institution from the middle of a chaotic branch lobby. Derek Lawson did not just withdraw $200 million from this bank. He took something far greater, the illusion that power gives anyone the right to look down on another human being. And Westbridge Financial just learned that lesson in the most expensive way possible. The lobby of Westbridge Financial, still trembling from the unprecedented shock it had just witnessed, no longer had a single person standing straight or breathing normally. Every gaze turned toward Derek Lawson, who now sat in the leather chair at the center of the room, like a judge who had just concluded a historic trial and was preparing to rewrite the entire rule book. CEO Robert Langford stood before him. His tie skewed his face, tight with tension, but his eyes filled with genuine respect, the kind of respect that appears only when someone realizes they are standing before a man greater than the system itself. Derek placed his tablet on the table, opened his leather briefcase, and pulled out a thick black folder embossed with a raised seal, Lawson Protocols Framework for Ethical Banking Reform. A wave of gasps rippled through the lobby. No one had imagined that the man they had insulted moments ago would walk in not only with nearly $1 billion, but with a reform blueprint capable of reshaping the entire banking industry. Robert opened the first page, his eyes widening as he read, Phase 1, AI, Bias Detection System. An artificial intelligence system monitoring all customer interactions in real time, detecting biased language, tone, and behavior. Any discriminatory act would be reported directly to headquarters. A man in the corner whispered, This is the future of banking. But Derek was not finished. He turned to the second section. Phase 2. Mandatory 40-hour bias and ethics training. Every employee from interns to branch managers must complete a 40-hour program on unconscious bias, human rights, and service standards. Final assessment is mandatory. Melanie broke into tears again, not from fear of being punished, but because she now understood that if this had existed earlier, she might never have committed the most expensive mistake of her life. Robert flipped to the next section. Phase 3, Customer Protection and Transparency. Anonymous reporting. Independent hotlines. A $100 million compensation fund for victims of discrimination. A public transparency dashboard for society to monitor. Tracy stared at the floor, her shoulders trembling, each sentence cutting deeper into the shame she knew she fully deserved. Phase 4. Leadership accountability. 15% of executive bonuses tied to the branch's fairness score. Any severe violation leading to immediate removal. As he read it, Robert's hands paused. He inhaled sharply, then exhaled slowly, as if absorbing a painful but necessary truth. Derek, he said quietly, his voice deep and sincere. These are not just good. They are what this industry has needed for decades. Derek leaned back in his chair, his eyes heavy but resolute. Today is not the day I take revenge. Today is the day I start correcting what the banking industry has done wrong to people like me for decades. This is your chance to change. And I will make sure it happens. Robert held his gaze and nodded. I accept everything. No amendments, no delays, no negotiation. The entire room fell silent. They knew they were watching a moment that would go down in history. A black billionaire forcing an entire financial system to its knees to relearn how to treat human beings. At that moment, Derek's phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen and allowed a faint smile. William Carter, CEO, Morgan Chase, Private Banking. He turned on speaker. William's voice echoed through the stunned lobby, polite but layered with unmistakable delight. Derek, I just saw the 200 million hit our system like a rocket. Is everything all right? We are ready to provide whatever you need. Legal communications, security. Robert swallowed hard. The room seemed to tighten. Derek replied calmly, Thank you, William. But I am talking to Robert Langford right now. We are making progress. William chuckled. Progress, or the kind of progress that gives him a heart attack. Derek glanced at Robert. The man stood there with a face mixed with humiliation, fear, and gratitude. The kind of progress that can change an industry, Derek answered. He ended the call gently, like closing a chapter. Then he stood up. He did not raise his voice. He did not posture. Yet every word rang clearly, carved into the walls. Today I did not just reclaim my dignity. I reclaimed the dignity of every person who ever walked into a bank and was treated as if they did not belong there. An elderly woman in the lobby lifted a hand to her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. You just did what so many of us have prayed for our whole lives. Derek nodded softly. He picked up his briefcase and walked toward the exit. Robert followed a few steps behind, as if escorting the man who had awakened him. When Derek's shoes touched the sidewalk outside, the afternoon sun spilled across his face, calm, steady, carrying a power that needed no declaration. The live stream ended on the filmmaker's final words. You just watched $200 million buy back the justice an entire system refused to give. And maybe from this day on, banks will never dare underestimate anyone again. Derek Lawson kept walking, not hurried, not angry, but with each step he delivered a message the entire world could feel. Dignity is never something others get to define. And from that moment on, the American banking industry would never be the same. From the perspective of an expert in organizational culture and modern leadership, Derek Lawson's story reveals an undeniable truth. The greatest weakness of any system does not lie in its procedures, but in the invisible biases people carry with them. A single dismissive remark, a prejudiced glance, a decision built on assumptions, all of these can unravel a structure that once seemed unshakable. And in contrast, when just one individual remains calm, steadfast, and fully aware of their own worth, they can force an entire system to confront its own failures. Derek did not respond with anger. He responded with truth, composure, and the weight of dignity. That is the kind of strength that creates lasting change. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like and subscribe so you can continue following the journeys where justice and self-respect are restored to their rightful place. And leave a comment with the phrase "Jiu Pham Jia" to remind each other that sometimes one person standing tall is enough to change an entire system.